This is Breaking Down Security, episode 11 for March 6th. So we're about to get into our part 2 of our interview with Strad and Jeff from I2P, the developers of I2P. And before we got started, I just wanted to put out a few announcements. B-Sides Proving Grounds Las Vegas is still doing call for papers, call for mentors for their Proving Grounds. If you've never given a talk before at B-Sides Las Vegas, you can get a hold of Tottenkopf or Security Moe on Twitter, or go to bsideslv.org and you can find out more information about Proving Grounds. Also, there's the 2015 Security Blogger Award Survey online. I'll put that in the show notes for the I2P here. We're not on the survey, but they do allow for write-ins. So if you're a loyal listener of Breaking Down Security and you like our content and think that we're worthy of Best New Security Podcast, I wouldn't hate on it if you put us in for a write-in vote. I've also suggested maybe putting the Defensive Sec folks, Andrew and Jerry, over there for Best Security Podcast, because they're friends of our podcast and they're pretty great guys. So if it so strikes you want to put somebody in there on the security survey, Best New Security Podcast, Breaking Down Security, make sure you spell it right, and the Defensive Security Podcast, that would be great. So I'm going to go right back into it here with Jeff and Strad. I asked them about the use of metadata and how it can actually affect the anonymization of anonymizing networks. So that's the first question I ask.
It is a huge deal.
Yeah. Maybe you could go into some of how metadata affects anonymization from your point of view.
Well, here's one excellent example. One of the, shall we say, digital online marketplaces. I won't name any names because I actually can't remember which one it was. There's been several of them. I recall a vendor on one site being arrested because one of the product pictures that he'd uploaded to the site contained GPS coordinates that his camera had set.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively they were able to look at the picture, read the metadata, and drive to his house.
Ouch.
Despite the fact that he'd used Tor, he'd used all that to anonymize himself.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very good example of the dangers of metadata. Other dangers, of course, that people refer to more in terms of emails is, of course, who you're talking to, how often you talk to them. Those sorts of information can be very valuable if you can tie it to a real-world person.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned picture metadata. Do you go as far as changing writing styles from time to time when you're doing things? Because using the same slang can often tie you to a person, or if you use the same, I don't know. I use a lot of ellipses, ... So, that might be a way to track me on an I2P site. Do you ever find yourself going, okay, I should probably not use the same terminology that I use on non-private communication?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly for myself, Jeff, I think he kept his identity up for a fair bit. I still keep mine is still technically pseudonymous, and yes, I think about that quite a lot in terms of, even speaking now, the way I'm speaking is another bit of identifying information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could pretty much stick you to a region, right?
You probably could.
I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to say anything, but when I first heard you speak, I was like, he is not from Alabama.
Or I'm just a really good actor.
Oh, damn. I never thought of that. Yeah. I mean, most actors from that island over there in the European area do put on some American accents pretty well, so it can go the other direction.
So one thing I liked about I2P was this this idea of just throwing packets, not really having a set direction as far as where your connection goes. Like if you establish a connection, it'll stay through those specific IP addresses. But with I2P, it's basically anything goes, and your return traffic doesn't necessarily come on the same path as the traffic you put out. I thought that was really a good anonymizer there.
Do you find yourselves, you mentioned a browser that one of your developers was working on. Is that because the newer browsers like Firefox and Chrome are becoming less and less easy to anonymize?
That is a good question. I'm not entirely sure why he's making that browser fork.
Well, the sense I get from it is that it's just to make things easier, because in essence, he's doing the job of what we recommend anyway, which is taking Tor browser and using that to run it to connect through I2P.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
He's in a sense just making a separate package to do that for the user already.
So, we had WebRTC in our show notes here. There was a recent story on Unhappy Ghost. It's a blog on cybersecurity about how RTC, or web real-time communication, can actually destroy anonymity. Is that something that, every time you see these kinds of things, you wonder if the future of things like HTML5 and all these new technologies to put a presentation is just a security nightmare?
I think that as it is now, if you want to have good privacy and security in the web browser, you're just going to turn off JavaScript completely. Because the negative aspects of having JavaScript on an anonymous browser is the negative aspects are far more there than the positive ones. Whereas the negative ones are, oh, hey, we just hooked your browser and injected this malicious JavaScript in your web browser that then loads something nasty elsewhere. Whereas if you don't have JavaScript on,
Well, that goes for other scripting too, right?
Right. But the pros of having JavaScript on is that the web page looks nice. Whereas if it's off and it doesn't look that nice, it's better than not having a rootkit.
Sure.
On your
You got me there.
It really, in that sense, it basically comes down to the fact that you can, JavaScript in particular is effectively you're running what amounts to unauthenticated source code in your browser.
Right.
So, and JavaScript just gives you so much leeway in terms of being able to shoot yourself in the foot or any other body part.
Sure.
So on a related note, there's a very neat project that does exactly that. It's called BeEF. If no one, yes, you're familiar with BeEF.
Oh, yes.
That thing made me scared enough to just turn off JavaScript completely in my Tor browser.
And as it should, it should, yes.
It's like,
oh my
nope,
God.
I don't want this running in my browser. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, on that note, this is one way you could de-anonymize yourself is visiting a site. Even on the I2P network, you could visit an EAP site, and that would have a BeEF hook or any other nefarious
or
scripting on
WebRTC.
it, and it would just basically give the attacker, the keys to your house, basically.
Right. Yes, and we take the way that Tor goes, because we always keep coming back to Tor, but really it is the best comparison as far because it's got a lot of publicity and a lot of public knowledge. More people understand it. It really is a good sort of bouncing board for understanding I2P. Because Tor has their own browser, they are able to actually put a lot of effort into securing the browser. So the Tor client itself doesn't do any anonymizing. It's just a transport layer. It has a SOCKS port, and just data gets sent in there and goes out. Because I2P traditionally hasn't had a browser or anything associated with it, we have actually taken a few more lengths to try and protect users. So the HTTP proxy that gets run locally, which translates, which is what allows a browser to connect into I2P, has whitelisting of HTTP headers, for instance. So things like accept language header, certain other content types and bits and pieces, we strip out. So we just don't allow it through, and that is basically sort of a bit of a catch-all to try and assist when people are using browsers that aren't so careful about what they send. And we do the same thing with our IRC tunnel. We whitelist the commands that are allowed to be used to limit, so that the commands that could be used to de-anonymize you are cut out. But again, there's only so much we can do with that, because we are fundamentally a transport layer anonymity. So we still rely on app developers effectively to develop their apps in a way that things don't get leaked.
Okay, so from a security or privacy standpoint, Jeff is disabling JavaScript, and as he should, and I would, if I didn't have to get on to, say, Google Docs and look at things. But do you have a policing of your I2P sites at all for, hey, you've just put a site up and you're, calling a third-party JavaScript file, or you're using jQuery and you're calling jQuery from the jQuery website? Do you have any kind of requirements for having an EAP site that, hey, going to this site is going to destroy your anonymity. Yeah, it's an EAP site, but don't go to it. Do you ever have anything like that?
Well, you really can't, right? Because EAP sites don't have to be published.
Right.
No, they can be what it.
So it's let the viewer beware then.
Yeah. Taking a quick detour back into the technical side, because that's the bit that I like.
Yeah.
The network database I talked about before, storing router information, it also stores what we call lease sets, and those are effectively the access points for the ends of the visible end of a tunnel, the end which when you have your I2P destination, that's what you connect to. So of course, if it's in the network database, you can connect to it. Doesn't matter. It's like, if you have an IP address on your router, on your computer, someone can scan the internet looking for IP addresses and find it.
Mm-hmm.
So there are ways to try and limit that, but there's, in a sense, the whole point of running this sort of thing is that we aren't trying to limit what people can do with it.
Okay.
That said, what we do have in terms of discoverability, we do have a list of EAP sites of interest, which we provide in the router console, just as things for helpers for people new to I2P to get started finding sites that are up. And we do require things like a terms of service. Just as I2P developers, we decide that we don't want to promote sites that don't have what we think of as a suitable terms of service. And again, if they were shown to have de-anonymizing or at least badly implemented JavaScript, likewise we probably wouldn't be promoting it. But we can't stop them doing that.
So I can run Google Analytics on my EAP site, and you guys don't have a problem with that.
Well,
we don't have a problem. Your users might.
Yeah.
That's true. Okay. All right.
So I built an EAP site, and if I don't, let's say I wanted to keep that secret between me and a couple of close friends or whatever, is there any way that other people can find out what that site is if they don't know who I am or my friends are? Is there a way I can search?
Could it be a trial and error thing, like a rainbow table, or because of the length, it would almost make that impossible to do?
As I said before, it is still possible to find services that are up. There's a lovely group of researchers in France who they were researching particularly Gnutella networks, and things. But what they basically did was scan. They were just scanning operating a flood fill firstly, so that other routers were publishing lease sets to them, and then they just take those lease sets and were trying to connect to them with different protocols. So they'd first try and connect with Gnutella protocol, then with HTTP, just to work out what service was on there. So it is possible to effectively scan like that, and given enough time and assuming that the website you're running is online for long enough, someone could eventually find the particular identifier for your site and access it. What you can do, however, is in I2P is do what's called an encrypted lease set. So only people who have the decryption key, you can get the lease set, but you can't actually read it until you've got this key. So that is the technique that you would use if you wanted to run an EAP site that was only accessible by you and a couple of friends. You would encrypt the lease set and then give your friends the decryption key.
Okay.
That's awesome.
So it's a lot like having custom SSL certs or a custom client SSL cert, and then unless you had that cert, you can't connect to it at all. So,
and you can still run those things over I2P. Like you could have an unencrypted lease set there, so someone can tell that there's a site running, but they try and connect to it, and they get this requirement for an SSL cert.
Mm-hmm.
So you can any of those technologies that you use on the regular web, you can run over I2P.
In addition, there's a neat little thing you can do is if you have your client-side destination for accessing that hidden service on I2P, if you persist the keys to that, you can whitelist each person's destination keys, destination public key, so that only those destinations will be responded to when they send requests in.
That would be equivalent to on your regular internet server whitelisting IPs.
With
so
IP
only
tables.
only certain IPs would be allowed to connect to your server. This is the
Is that
equivalent
attached
inside.
to the router info?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's not. This is just purely in your router. So another person would have your lease set and connect to your tunnel. The I2P router that is hosting your service would see that, compare it to the whitelist, and if it's allowed, it would then forward that request onto your application. So
Otherwise, it'll just
in
drop.
terms of this, yeah. So in that sense of whitelisting, your server, your website, wouldn't even see the connection because it would have been dropped at the router.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's cool. So let me ask you a question. If somebody was able, I got one question from people because I posted something on Twitter earlier today, #BreakSec, asking about questions that we wanted to ask you guys. And one of our friends, Jared, hey Jared, he asked about attacks. Hey Jared. He asked about attacks on I2P. And I know that we had mentioned earlier about Tor. There was, I don't know, what was it, Lizard Freak? One of the quote unquote hacker groups had set up a bunch of Tor nodes, and they were able to effectively control a majority of the Tor network. With the decentralization of I2P, that's not possible, right? For the creation of a bunch of I2P routers to be able to de-anonymize somebody effectively?
Oh, it's possible.
Okay.
Yeah. That is what's, as you said in your show notes there, that's what's known as a Sybil attack.
Okay.
So, and a Sybil attack is common to any network. You basically have an adversary sets up a whole bunch of nodes participating in the network, and once they have over a certain threshold, they basically control the network. It's the same as the 51% attack in Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's the exact same thing. If you control over 51% of the network, you can control the blockchain. In I2P's case, because it's decentralized, you would need a huge number of nodes in order to control the whole network. But what you would do instead is do what's called a partial key space attack. In that sense, you effectively set up routers, flood-fill routers, whose hashes are very close to a particular target. Mm-hmm. So you know how I mentioned earlier that a router info or a lease set is stored in the NetDB on flood fields whose hashes are closest to the hash of that router info or lease set. So if an attacker can get their flood fields to be the 8 closest, then they can basically ensure that when lease set is published, it gets published only to theirs. And then they can do things like deny other people from accessing it. So someone could request a lease set and they go, no, it doesn't exist.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of different attacks you can do there. So Sybil attacks are relatively hard to defend against. But that said, Sybil isn't technically an attack. It's generally a stepping stone to another attack. And so what we focus on, or what we really can focus on, is preventing the attacks that Sybil could be used for. So even if they have these bunch of nodes, they can't do anything with them.
Okay. Excellent. So I have a question. So when I started doing research on the anonymization networks, my whole thought process was they were wretched hives of scum and villainy where only bad people go to do nefarious things. Silk Road, for instance, Carter sites, you hear from Brian Krebs and them. You mentioned there are known good sites on your help console, but how do you mentioned terms of service for certain websites, but do you see anonymizing networks? How can we make people see anonymizing networks something more than just a bunch of Carterware sites, CP sites, that kind of thing?
I'll let you start with this one, Jeff.
Sure. So
as the I2P PR guy.
Right. So in my experience, I found that I2P was probably the most tame and not necessarily tame, but had the best community of any place I've ever been on the internet so far. And it's a really good question. How do you mitigate assholes in an open anonymous forum? If you ever find out that a way to really fully mitigate that problem, please tell us, and Tor Project too. How do you really mitigate those kind of people? I don't know.
Well, I mean, other than the known goods you have in your help console, are there any other sites that because I'm trying to figure out why you would want to use an anonymizing service other than to maybe protect yourself from the government or something. Are there any sites out there like I don't know, like a Wikipedia for I2P, or is there
we used to have one. Then the guy left after the raid on Tor with what was that? Anonymous or Ominous? Operation Ominous?
Operation Ominous, yeah.
Yes. Gisco was one of the sites it wasn't seized, but it just disappeared during that raid, and it never came back. But it was a really, really good resource it was basically just a darknet Wikipedia.
Okay.
Then there's NACL.I2P, which is a crypto anarchism wiki.
Okay.
But when it comes down to it, I've found that I2P isn't really that good for HTTP.
Mm-hmm.
I found that it's a lot better for the peer-to-peer kind of things, where you have a more fault-tolerant system that you're working with. That's not just one giant centralized Google or Facebook that you're hitting.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes down to content, I find that, how do you get people to use these networks? I think that instead of focusing on, we can use this to do bad stuff, I think that the more important question is not can you use it to do bad stuff, is how as much as it is how easy it is it to use it for good things.
That's great.
And-
In a sense, yeah.
Yeah.
The view I take on it is that it's a tool. Tor's a tool, Freenet's a tool. You're always going to find someone who's going to use it for nefarious purposes.
Mhm.
And yes, these do tend to lend themselves to it. But at the same time, you have the exact same problem with the regular internet.
Right.
Sure.
There's always going to be a certain percentage. The issue that I think I2P has with regard to this is more about popularity in terms of like, you've got like Global Leaks and Secure Drop is a package that was developed effectively for journalists to enable sources to contact them anonymously. I2P doesn't have something like that, but that's mostly just because no one's implemented it. It would be very trivial to do so.
Sure.
Something that I2P does have, for instance, is I2P Boat, which is effectively a distributed high latency email system. So that's one good example of it's not a web service, but it is a service running over I2P that a bunch of people do use. There have been various implementations of social networks on I2P.
There's also the built-in BitTorrent client,
Yep.
which we do network upgrades with.
Yeah. It's
because the other,
like you said, it's a tool, right?
Yeah.
You can use a tool for good. You can use a tool for bad. Guns, knives, ski masks,
reform.
whatever your analogy is. I mean, so there's always going to be bad people, and they're going to use I2P at some point, and good people use I2P, right? So I think it's more about freedom, right?
There was a really nice quote actually from on another podcast back in, was it 2009, from Lance James, who is the
grandfather.
He basically was one of the guys who started I2P. It was him and a couple of other people who were basically got started out with that. He's currently the head of cyber intelligence at Deloitte and Touche LLP.
okay.
And so it was he and a bunch of other people who started it. And so he did an interview in, I think, 2009 with ZZZ. And one of the things he said was that, of course, it seems a bit disingenuous going from developing an anonymity network to going to a cyber intelligence company that deals in trying to respond to and prevent malicious attacks. And the thing he noted was that through his work, he's found that actually most of the time you don't need to be able to break an anonymous network in order to take down these malicious adversaries, because you can attack them in other ways if you have the right resources, particularly the money trail. Which, of course, that's changing a bit now, the environment of that with things like Bitcoin, although Bitcoin, again, is still basically the most public money system you have in the world, ironically.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily need to break the anonymity of Tor or I2P in order to find these people, because they tend to make mistakes in other ways or have other avenues that you can get at them with. So the fact that I2P or Tor happens to be protecting them in addition to protecting everyone else doesn't mean that they aren't accessible. Meanwhile, the people who actually truly benefit from these anonymity systems can get those benefits, but because they're not they're generally not as much of an interest to to the people. Well, here we get into the issues with adversary classification, which is a whole other topic. But
Do you guys do extensive?
As we said,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
at its core, at its core, it's a tool, and people are going to use it for good or bad, and it's just our job to make it as easy as possible for it to be used for good.
Do you guys do hardcore code reviews? I mean, you have to protect yourself from maybe the mole developer working for, say, a government entity, slipping in a back door or two, things like that?
So
We do as much as we can. We honestly need as much developer, not just developer code review, but we need people to actually help with development. We have a track that is waiting, not really waiting, but we have a track full of stuff that people can just jump onto and start contributing with. There are many very small track tickets that are very easy to solve, that are solvable, but the number of UI related tweaks that can be done that are in track are quite numerous, and most of our time, I guess, is spent tweaking the UI tier because seems like not much else is done at this point.
okay. So that was a question I was going to ask. If somebody wanted to help out with I2P, how would they go about doing that? I mean, would they just install I2P, hop onto IRC, and start,
Yep.
start talking? And I mean, is there any
That's
kind of rep
exactly
that has to be built up, or
The reputation you build up is from submitting patches, and it's purely based on merit. We don't really have anything besides if you submit good patches, we accept them.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah, and even if you happen to be one of those few who has trouble actually setting up I2P, we also have relays in Freenode and OFTC for the main dev channel, I2P-dev. So getting in touch is not generally a problem.
Okay.
Now, going back to your review thing, we do. Well, firstly, most of our patches tend to be submitted by ZZZ because he's really the primary developer at this point. So if we don't trust him, then we're kind of screwed. But what we always do also, the way that our development process works, we have a week out from doing a release, we freeze tags, so it gives translators time to translate. And then the weekend before we release, we generally go through and review the entire list of diff. So effectively the entire set of changes between the previous release and what we're about to release, and go through and just check basically things like, is it done correctly? Are there any major bugs? And then of course more looking ideally for more subtle things. But as always, more eyes is always beneficial. And because it's all open source, anyone who wants to look at it can do so.
Okay.
So we're kind of running low on time, but is there anything that you want our listeners to be, to take away from this, or what you want them to know about I2P?
I think that the biggest thing is that while darknets may seem really stark and ominous and scary, often that's really rarely the case, and that it's actually quite nice on IRC. Ah, crap, my headphones.
So I think my takeaway is that I've got to learn to be patient, because nothing is ever going to be fast on a dark net.
Yeah.
No. And that's only the low latency ones. When you start getting into things that are intentionally high latency for further anonymity benefits, like I2B Boat, for instance, which I'm doing a fair bit of development on now. I developed the Android app for I2P Boat, and and as well as currently doing maintenance on the plugin, which is the traditional way of using it. And you send an email on that and don't expect it to arrive within half an hour. That's intentionally designed to take time. Could be a couple of hours if you add in extra relaying to add extra anonymity benefits. But yes, as far as just even setting up I2P, relax, chill out. It's going to take some time. I2P has to, your router has to integrate and find other nodes and, find its place in the network. It doesn't have a list it can just go to and find the fastest nodes. It's going to take a bit of time. So, set it running, go away, have a coffee, have lunch, and,
Okay.
And if something's not working, generally wait 10 minutes and try again. Because often, for instance, tunnels in I2P, they are rebuilt every 10 minutes. And so if you're trying to do something like access a website and it's not working, it could be because your tunnel, one of the nodes in it has suddenly frozen or is no longer functioning or it's gone offline, or likewise for the server's nodes. So if you wait 10 minutes, the tunnels have cycled, you can often get through.
Cool.
So yeah, patience.
Okay.
And then I guess my takeaway for listeners would be, it's not as hard as it looks, which is a big step because I know that our router console in particular is terrible, really, for new users. It takes a lot. The homepage that we have now that has services and deep sites of interest and things is a better step, but there's still a lot that could be done. I myself in particular, one of the reasons I actually got involved in I2P and got interested in actually helping out was because I looked at it and went, oh, this could be so much better. 4 years later, it hasn't really changed much, which tells you how much education and experience I have as a user experience designer. But that's certainly that's one of my focuses for this year, is to try and figure out a way to just strip away the complexity and make it easier for people to understand what's going on. Okay. And if you need the extra benefits, they can be there, but there's a lot we can do to help simplify it for our users.
Cool. So that was one of the last things I wanted to ask about the future of I2P. If you were, trying to, I guess you guys have a hey, what's the name of that track site? I'll put it on our Google Doc, and our listeners can maybe help out with that.
Oh, that's currently I2P internal right now because we got hit by a spammer.
No.
Oh, we did. Okay. The web addresses in I2P is track dot I2P2.de.
2.de.
Outside I2P, but that's the one that's down. And then inside I2P, it's the same track.I2P2.I2P.
Okay.
And so you can ask for a track login on IRC, and we'll give it to you, as long as you don't use that to spam 500 tickets an hour. So. Okay.
And if you're a developer, then you want to be fluent in what kind of languages?
Java.
Ew. I mean,
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, if you want to talk about got to be fluent in C.
Yeah. True. Well, next thing you're going to tell me is all these DHTC servers run Oracle or something. So.
Oh. Got
it. Anyway, all right. So.
Well, yeah, we would accept help from anyone knowing, well, pretty much any language really, because the main I2P stuff is in Java. The router console things are in JSP, but there's also, for example, an old developer of ours, Sponge, developed this torrent client called Robert in Python, and that currently Sponge is no longer able to develop it. So that's one instance where a Python developer could be very beneficial. Okay. Likewise, we have a bunch of APIs that we want to get up, that we're slowly getting up and running in different languages so that it's easier for a C developer to use an I2P router. And so those APIs, in C, in Go, in Python, whatever, a developer who wanted to be able to write an app in that language, it would be very beneficial if they were to, talk with us and actually help develop an API for that.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you know what? Sounds like
and
you
then
guys
we'll take websites, people, UI developers, basically anyone.
That's cool. You need some more PR people. I mean, you've got 2 people here, so that's great. So, Jeff, you're doing a great job because we got a hold of you first. So that's
I mean, the caffeine basically stopped working at the moment the microphone went on. So
it's okay. You're always on. The PR guy's got a hard job. So
yeah.
Well, Strad and Jeff, we appreciate you guys coming on and helping us understand a little bit about I2P and actually darknets in general. I hope you don't flay us too badly inside the IRC channel. Us noobs out here in the real world, don't understand, I guess. So now
we're very welcoming, and we do our best to try and help teach new users.
I appreciate that. That's what we're here for too. We're here to teach users and people on security topics. So now we're gonna expose ourselves a little more. Mr. Betcher is on Twitter at BetcherPwned. I am on Twitter at Brian Break. You can use the hashtag BreakSec to ask myself questions. If you want to ask Strad or Jeff any questions, feel free to hit us up on BreakSec and we can pass those along to them, unless they have.
Well, I have Twitter, yes. Just Strad, STR4D.
STR4D.
Twitter is actually one of the. Yeah, I was never a big Twitter user before creating this identity, but I find Twitter actually tends to be one of the main meeting points for the security community.
Yes.
So it's a really good way, that and mailing lists. So it's a really good way to keep in touch with, keep your finger on the pulse on what's going on. So okay. Yeah, I'm always open to questions on there. If you have anything particular, just hashtag I2P and we'll see it.
Okay.
And there is at get I2P and at I2P. At I2P is ZZZ's Twitter, and at get I2P is the official PR Twitter for I2P. And my personal Twitter is at Ampernand.
You're gonna have to spell that one, brother.
I know. It's AMPERNAND.
Okay.
It's like ampersand, but with N. It was actually a typo. So.
Oh, Ampernand. There it is. Right?
Yeah, there we go. Yay.
All right. So I would ask if we're going to if you go to conferences or are going to give talks, but that seems kind of counterproductive for somebody who cares about his privacy and anonymity.
I'll see if I can figure that out eventually.
There is actually we generally are at CCC. We always have a table at we had one this year at 31C3 right next to the EFF table actually, so it was a really good location in Noisy Square.
Very nice.
So there's always a bunch of I2P developers at CCC, and depending on availability, sometimes the devs will get to other meetings. A year or two ago, we had a bunch of us at Real World Cryptography, and I think actually we're in the process of working out potentially having an I2P specific meetup with Toronto Crypto.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I'll have to pass that along to my
possibly around July, August.
So that was our interview with Jeff and Strad from I2P. Raised a lot of good points about the fact that anything can be used for evil, whether it be Nmap or I2P. When we recorded this was before we had found out, at least I'd found out, that the malware on financial networks was using I2P and EAP proxy for command and control servers. So that's just another way that a tool can be used for evil in that case. So that was quite interesting to find out just recently. So again, as we said in the first part of the podcast, if you have any questions for Strad or Jeff, you can hook us up with that question on Twitter. You can use the hashtag BreakSec or tweet me up at Brian Break. You can also hit Mr. Betcher at BetcherPwned. You can also get a hold of the I2P folks at Jeff is at Ampernand, and Strad is at Strad, and it's STR4D. You can also get a hold of ZZZ, who's one of the developers at I2P, or using the hashtag I2P. Breaking Down Security is also on Facebook. You can find us at facebook.com/breakingdownsec. That's BRAKEING, down sec. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, as I mentioned. We have a LinkedIn group. So if you are interested in continuing the conversation, you can do that at any one of those outlets. We're also on Google Plus if you want to find my name, Brian Brake. I'm not too scared about adding people on Google Plus. So that was episode 11. Have a good week, and we'll see you soon. All right, later.